Texas is great.
Yikes. I always enjoy the Texas shows, and I like the people out here quite a lot.
All right, getting some rendering done here. John Johnson on your right with Simic Nexus. Jody Keith on your left with Rakdos Midrange. I believe Keith is the higher seed. He's going to be on the play.
Just a tap Blood Crypt to start, though it's not really a deck that plays 1-drops, just a forest for John Johnson.
Yeah, so against 1-drops, in fact, that it likes to play Cinder Barons.
And he likes to discard it to his Rixamati Reveler, and we'll go back John Johnson's way.
Yeah, and this is a good start. He's able to translate one of those extra lands into a potential spell. We'll see if he can follow this up with some more pressure and make the Simic Nexus deck have it, so to speak.
The Reveler will connect, and a Goblin Chain Whirler will deal another point. Johnson to 17. He has an end-step Growth Spiral. This could be that turn 3 Wilderness Reclamation that makes these decks so scary.
Yeah, and as long as he has a bit of things to do with that Wilderness Reclamation, it could be problematic for Jody Keith.
Ooh, and that is it. The land put in off of the Growth Spiral was a Memorial to Genius, and here's an island in the Reclamation passing back Keith's way, but he has his Mana Engine online.
Yeah, just a really strong start from John Johnson. That turn 3 Wilderness Reclamation, as long as he has Chemist's Insight or some way to translate that extra mana into an advantage, he'll be in okay shape.
5 more points come across. Johnson down to 12. No plays for Keith as Johnson will cast another Growth Spiral end step, put in a Hinterland Harbor. On his turn, he'll play a forest up to 6 mana. And here's a Hydroid Krasis, X equals 4.
Right, and that's X equals 4, so he's going to gain 2 life and draw 2 cards, but also provide a giant blocker for these creatures. And he also gets to untap all his lands during his instep, which means that if he has some more interaction, he can play it right now.
And I think that these Wilderness Reclamation decks figuring out, starting to adopt Hydroid Krasis has really made them all that much scarier. Krasis for 4 is so powerful, but then untapping all your lands after the fact, that's horrifying.
Yeah, and one of the reasons why I was so drawn to the teamer versions of Wilderness Reclamation was because of things like Niv Mizzet. When you pair Niv Mizzet with the ability to untap all your lands, we all know that when you get to untap with a Niv Mizzet, the game is usually over.
Yep.
It's very hard to lose if you get to untap all of your lands and start casting your spells. Now, the way that the Reclamation decks are built, they play almost primarily at instant speed, which means if you get to untap with a Niv Mizzet, you get to do some serious damage with Wilderness Reclamation. Here with Hydroid Krasis, you aren't doing quite as much damage in that vein, but you do get that card draw guaranteed as well as that life gain.
Keith's going to send the team again. Hydroid Krasis jumps in front of the Chain Whirler. It's like Keith wants to move to first strike damage and pair that with a shock. They'll take care of the Krasis, and the Reveler will knock Johnson to 12.
Yep. So undoes the life gain, but still has those 2 cards that he's drawn. Still has the ability to pop Memorial to Genius if he has no other play, which he looks like he's going to do.
Yeah, that's the play for Johnson as Keith doesn't have any other action on his turn. We'll go back Johnson's way.
Yeah, kind of sitting on things like the Eldest Reborn, but not even enough mana to cast it to get full value out of it right there.
Hinterland Harbor is the land for turn for Johnson, and there is a second Wilderness Reclamation, and this is just Simic Nexus, so his colors are all online here with 2 Reclamations in tow. He's about to make a ton of mana, floating 2 going to that first untap trigger.
Yeah, now, the question is, what does he have to do with all that extra mana? So he's in a spot right now where he has all the mana in the world. He's floating 4, casts Chemist's Insight, still has 1 more untap left as well as the ability to float 4 from these lands here. If he finds Nexus of Fate, things could get really, really bad for Jody Keith really fast.
It'll be another Chemist's Insight. That means he'll be 1 shy on a Nexus this turn, but he does still get to untap all 6 lands here. See if he has anything else end step, though it's likely he'll just pass. Anything he could cast here is an instant anyway.
Right, and Jody Keith not threatening lethal with an attack here, just hitting in for 5. John actually goes for a Root Snare here to protect his life total. He really doesn't want to get burned out, and I'm sure with an excess of cards in hand, he is more than fine burning that Root Snare to save 5 damage. Post-combat, though, a Carnage making him discard 2 cards and dealing him 3 damage. Jody Keith really showing the strength and versatility of that card.
Yeah, and with Keith coming in for 3 points off of that, you do like that Fog from Johnson, just protecting his life total. He'll stabilize on 9 on this turn, and he'll jumpstart a Chemist's Insight.
Yeah, and both players here in the top 8 have access to each other's deck list. They all know the tricks. Johnson knows that Jody has shocks. He knows he has like a Siege Gang Commander and other ways to deal direct damage that actually go through his fog effects with Root Snare.
Here's another Memorial to Genius for Johnson. Nice interaction with the Wilderness Reclamation. He'll get to untap that later this turn. And here's a big one. Search for Escanta is deployed. That makes it really easy to start just going off with make that 3 Wilderness Reclamations.
And he still has at least one Chemist's Insight in the graveyard. That Memorial to Genius was played this turn, but with the ability to untap it. And he's just going off right now.
Yeah, there's another Insight from the hand. As you mentioned, there was already still one in the graveyard. He'll float 3 mana and then untap his lands.
Yeah, he's going to cast another Chemist's Insight here from the 3 floating. He still has 1 untap left off the Wilderness Reclamations as well. And still has, if I'm not mistaken, 1 more Chemist's Insight in the graveyard.
A lot of looks. Looks like there's a Growth Spiral in the hand. That one's a little mopey right now.
I mean, the trick here is if he can find a Nexus of Fate, that's going to allow him to transform that Search for Escanta and, in turn, allow him to get a bunch of untaps, which in turn finds more Nexus of Fate.
He'll discard a Blink of an Eye to jumpstart Chemist's Insight again. Drawn plenty of extra cards. Hard to believe that he was hit by a Mind Rot sort of effect, just hanging out with 6 cards in hand here. And untapping again, but it looks like that's it for the turn. We're going back to Jody Keith's side of things. Attack for 5 for Keith. There's another Root Snare. Johnson protecting that life total.
Yeah, and he's also holding up Frilled Mystic right now, and he's going to go ahead and deploy 1 and take care of that Eldest Reborn, and he gives himself a potential blocker for something like Rick's Mighty Reveler on the following turn. But with that Escanta about to transform, did he miss the trigger?
I think that he remembered the trigger but didn't transform. He put the Breeding Pool from the top of his deck in the graveyard, if I'm not mistaken.
Oh, you're right.
And here's Hydroid Krasis, X equals 6, goes into 12, draws 3 cards, and has 3 Wilderness Reclamations waiting to just go off.
Yeah, but he's already burned through quite a few of those Chemist's Insight. The trick here is finding a Nexus of Fate, and then he could just end the game without even transforming that Search for Escanta. He just gets to attack for 9 next turn, Nexus of Fate again, attack for 9 again. Jody Keith is tapped out.
Yeah, there was an attack for the Mystic. Keith at 17, lining up that die for those Reclamation triggers. Here's the first on tap.
He's seen so many cards in his deck. You have to imagine he has a Nexus of Fate right now. The question is, does he have a second one?
Well, he's starting with cracking Memorial to Genius. Not sure if he has the Nexus. He's going to float 2 mana. Here's the untap. He's got to have something big by now.
There's 7 mana. That looks like a Nexus of Fate to me.
Yeah, indeed it is. Stack up 1 extra turn. We've been using the extra turn counter that we usually use for time in the round to track these this weekend.
Yeah, so, and he still has 1 more Wilderness Reclamation on the stack, so he gets to float 2, untap, float even more if he likes, and follow that up with next turn he gets to transform Escanta, attack for 9, find another Nexus, and that's all she wrote.
Yeah, 2 floating with that last untap trigger. 1 green, 1 blue. Growth Spiral is where he'll start, empty that mana pool.
And with that extra mana, he's just trying to find any way to dig for another Nexus of Fate. Another Frilled Mystic here actually provides him with quite a bit of damage.
Yeah, he'll just flash that in, not about to counter anything. And so Johnson's going to untap for that extra turn. Now is 12 power, a little shy of lethal, but 1 more Nexus will do it. Search for Escanta will keep a card and transform. Feels like he's at least got a lot of looks at that Time Walk if he doesn't already have it. But there it is.
Yeah, I mean, this was basically way overkill. He was just digging for that first Nexus of Fate for so long, eventually found it, and Jody Keith wasn't able to apply quite enough pressure to get the job done, and John Johnson takes down game 1.
Yeah, 1-0 in favor of John Johnson so far. We kind of expected that was about the script for this matchup, so we're going to reach for the sideboards. Jody Keith needs some help. He has some options here, though. 4 Duress, 3 Legion Warboss, 2 Fiery Cannonade, 2 Theater of Horrors, a Drill Bit, a Status Statue, a Fight with Fire, and a Shock. What do you like here, Todd?
I like getting all the removal out of my deck as much as possible. I would get Lava Cools out for sure, a couple copies of Shock. The Eldest Reborn, even though they can take care of a Hydroid Krasis, that's not where you want to be. You'll usually be able to deploy enough little creatures that can attack around the Hydroid Krasis as opposed to having to go through it with a removal spell. Since John Johnson isn't killing your creatures, we saw that game. Jody Keith cast a few. They just kind of hung out the whole time and attacked a few times and whatever. So Jody Keith here, I don't think wants any removal in his deck. He's going to look at Duress as a means to trim down either Nexus of Fate or Wilderness Reclamation from John Johnson. He's going to want Legion Warboss as a creature that provides a lot of burst damage without a lot of investment. It just closes the game quickly if John Johnson's unable to find those root snares. And then not sold on Theater of Horrors, but it might be good as a way to just help him dig for more burn, more direct damage and such. Drill Bit, just basically a 5th duress coming in. And then that's about it. The rest of his sideboard is built for handling creatures. Fiery Cannonade, Status Statue alongside Chain Whirler as a way to help out against some of those more annoying creature-based decks. And then Fight with Fire and Shock, both just more spot removal.
So for John Johnson, his sideboard, pretty creature-heavy. You see a fair amount of this with the Simic Nexus deck. 4 copies of Biogenic Ooze, 3 Negate, 3 Crushing Canopy, 2 Carnage Tyrant, a Palaka Worm, a Nezahal Primal Tide, and a Sagittar's Volley. Pop quiz. Give me the Oracle text on Sagittar's Volley.
2 and a green. Destroy target creature with flying. Deal 1 damage to all other flying creatures that player controls.
You nailed it, man.
Yeah, it's because I literally played this gauntlet with the Simic Nexus deck on Tuesday on Versus Live, and you can check out Versus Live every Tuesday and Thursday, 1 p.m. Eastern Time on this channel that you're watching right now. And if you're watching this on YouTube, make sure to head over to twitch.tv/SCGTour.
Love that plug. How's Johnson going to sideboard?
I like going creature heavy. Again, you're playing the switcheroo game. Your opponent is going to board out a bunch of removal. You can board in Biogenic Ooze. Aside from that, I don't like Negate. I don't like Crushing Canopy. These aren't cards you really want to be leaning on in this matchup. Carnage Tyrant might be a pretty good threat, but we saw John Johnson just basically has a fight through duress, and since they know each other's sideboards, it's possible he just ignores all of this creature-based stuff, goes full-blown combo, since Jody Keith has a limited amount of interaction for him. Maybe brings in the Palak Worm to give himself a life buffer, but that's about it.
Yeah, and if you've been watching coverage on the SCG Tour here this year, you know we've been using that Cardboard Live extension. You can get these deck lists here. We have them posted on StarCityGames.com as well at this point in the tournament, as we have the top 8 locked up. And if you're looking for a place to try out some of these new standard decks, maybe check out Star City Games Game Night. It's February. That means we're on Yeti Steady Go for the promotion. You got those unique tokens and sleeves.
Yeah, and you can win those at your local game night. To find a game night near you, check out go.starcitygames.com/game night, and you too can pick up a Yeti Steady Go Beast token. That's going to supplant me.
Yeah, they're going to replace your Beast, man.
Oh, man.
I just had that thought, too. We did have the Todd Anderson Beast earlier this
I'll
weekend.
be a dinosaur. It's fine. Just retire the Beast, become the Dino.
I want to see that token.
That
sounds great. We have some updates on our back tables. A little bit of an upset in our Mono Blue Aggro feature. Tannen Grace actually loses to Robert Wagner Krenkel 2-0.
Oh, no. Oh, no. We just got another result from our backup feature match. My pick to win the tournament, Dylan Donegan, has been defeated.
Yeah, Juan Leyva does take that one, the 5 seed over the 4.
Look, I called Dylan Donegan winning it, but Juan Leyva has really impressed me with his play this weekend, and so honestly, it's not a surprise. You know, he might be the favorite now after watching him play, watching just how good those of Johnny's Pride mates have been in his version of the deck. You know, it wouldn't surprise me at all if he just takes the crown.
And I said at the top of the day, and it was my pick on what we would play.
Oh, you didn't you?
That Azorius Aggro is my pick for this weekend.
Oh, were you at Johnny's Pride mating?
I was not doing that, but Eric Hawkins is still alive.
That's true,
but they're on the same side of the bracket, so we can't have a finals that's only Azorius Aggro.
Good. Someone needs to take you down a peg.
That's true. I deserve it. I do not deserve the success that I have seen.
All right, both players here finishing up, shuffling, about ready to start game 2. John Johnson up a game against Jody Keith's Rakdos mid-range deck. Let's see if Jody's able to draw the necessary tools to interact with this potent, combo-centric ramp deck in Simic Nexus.
Yeah, Keith is going to want to see some of those sideboard discard spells, and he'd also like to see what should probably just be the name card of his deck. We should call this Rakdos Treasure Map. That's just his most important card.
Yeah, they banned Ramunap Ruins, but they still keep trying to get a map in there somehow. Isn't that weird that a land is banned? Then it's not even, like, that good.
Yeah, well, that one's rotated now.
Yeah,
we still have Rampaging Frostodon is banned.
Yeah, look, I'm living in 2015-16 or 2016-17 over here. 2018-19. It's all blurred.
I don't know what year it is.
It just changed. You expect me to know what year it is? just changed. All right. Jody
That was
Keith
a
here.
weird update.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Sorry. Anyway, Jody Keith here, taking a mulligan to 6. Didn't like a 7. Going to see if he could find a duress drill bit, as well as a bit of pressure to put the clock on John Johnson, hopefully before he can get that powerful Wilderness Reclamation online.
And mulligans do not behoove decks like Jody's. He's going down on cards in a deck that relies on Treasure Map for some card advantage, because most of what he's doing is just casting 4 and 5 mana spells. Like Siege Gang Commander, it's a lot of value, but in terms of card economy, it's, does being on the table matter is your question. Against a deck like Simic Nexus, not really.
Yeah, I mean, they invalidate a lot of the attacking damage you can gain from a Rakdos mid-range deck just with a 2-mana Fog and Root Snare. And it's been one of the better pairs with Nexus of Fate over the last 4 months or so, even before this new set came out and gave us all these really powerful Azorius and Simic tools. Now that we have Growth Spiral, Wilderness Reclamation, the deck has gone into hyperdrive, and clearly it doesn't even need to play Teferi, Hero of Dominaria anymore.
Yeah, John Johnson really just kind of being a combo deck, hyper-focused on doing that thing. Jody Keith does keep on 6. He'll squire to the top, just a Blood Crypt to start, and another on turn 2. Johnson led on Breeding Pool, and Memorial to Genius is the turn 2 play, so no search for Escanta.
Yep, and that's a really important part of this strategy. And I think at some point people are going to realize it. And John Johnson even moving towards 4 copies of Search for Escanta, which hasn't really been a thing in a lot of these decks. Most players playing 3 because of that legendary status, but John Johnson understanding how important that card is alongside Wilderness Reclamation.
Yeah, and that is the turn 3 play there. Hinterland Harbor tap. That was Simic Guildgate on turn 1.
Right, and this is a downside of, like, your mana base on occasion. You're trying to fit all these double green, double blue cards with Mystic, and because of that, he is playing 2 copies of Simic Guildgate, and along with the 4 copies of Immortal Genius, and that's really putting him under a bit of pressure here. Drill bit from Jody Keith. Gonna take a look at the hand.
And this is a hand that also just does not have more land drops. There's some good spells. We have Hydrate Krasis, Frilled Mystic, Wilderness Reclamation, Growth Spiral, Chemist's Insight. Second Search for Escanta. That one unlikely to be the takeoff of the drill bit. Probably reach for the Reclamation, and Keith does.
Yeah, it is the card that brings this hand together. And if Jody can apply a bit more pressure here and play a 2-drop or perhaps land into a second Chain Whirler, he can maybe apply enough pressure to force John Johnson to do some desperation plays like playing a Frilled Mystic to block.
That Chain Whirler hit put Johnson to 16, though there's no follow-up for Keith. Johnson does draw the 4th land, but the Reclamation is in the bin, so he'll just pass right back.
Yeah, he does have Frilled Mystic at the ready now, even though he doesn't have Wilderness Reclamation. Jody Keith did take that with the drill bit, gave himself a bit more time. The Chain Whirler off the top has met with that Frilled Mystic.
So Mystic counters the second Chain Whirler. The first does come across. Johnson to 13.
Now, if Johnson just hits lands for the rest of the game, I think he'll be set up reasonably well just because he has access to Hydroid Krasis in hand. He's looking for things or mana to do or cast the spells in his hand. He has Chemist's Insight. He has a lot of ways to draw cards, and at the moment he just needs some way to help put the game away.
And Search for Escanta is helping him do that. He flips over a Root Snare and draws Breeding Pool for turn. He'll play that tapped. End step, Keith is going to use Shock to take care of the Frilled Mystic, and will go back his way. Attack with the Chain Whirler. Johnson's to 10, and here's Siege Gang Commander. Johnson's got to do something now because this is lethal next turn.
Yeah, this Chain Whirler is attacked in there 3 times, it looks like. 1 point from its ability. And with this Siege Gang Commander, even in the face of a Root Snare, could potentially do lethal over 2 turns, just throwing all the goblins in John Johnson's face. That is 5 goblins, 2 damage apiece.
Johnson will fire off Chemist's Insight end step. He'll use Search for Escanta, put a Breeding Pool in the graveyard, and draw Memorial to Genius. And here's Wilderness Reclamation.
Yep. Now the question is, does he have Nexus of Fate? He has 1 to float, and he has 6 total lands on the battlefield right now. If he has Nexus, he gets to untap, maybe transform Search for Escanta, and go crazy. He even has that Hydroid Krasis to pad his life total a little bit, should he need. And Root Snare can prevent a lot of the combat damage, and with Jody Keith only on 5 lands, he can't quite throw all the damage at John Johnson's face just yet to close the game.
He had 1 floating. There's no Nexus. He's going to start with Growth Spiral in the end step here. We saw the hand a bit ago, and it wasn't flush with lands. He has some redraws with that Chemist's Insight, but there's no land being put in here. He's going to pass back Keith's way. Keith will attack with all the goblins. This is 8 damage just as an attack. So there's pressure for Johnson to have a root snare here, something to break this up.
Yeah, and he put one into the graveyard earlier with a search for Escanta, and you have to imagine he has root snare here, or else he's dead.
Mm-hmm.
I believe he has a blink of an eye he's about to cast, but I think if Jody Keith just throws that at the dome, that puts him to 8. 5 points still coming in, puts him to 3. A land from Jody Keith would be game over. Let's see if he has it.
Johnson's going to kick that blink with the eye. Looks at, like it's at the Siege Gang Commander. Keith will respond by throwing that.
Yeah, if he throws it, the dome puts him to 8. 6 damage comes in, and then a shock.
Keith's actually going to rewind. He's going to shock real quick. Then he's going to sacrifice the Siege Gang Commander. That puts Johnson to 6, and conveniently, 6 point of damage coming across in combat here.
That's weird. 6 damage when you're at 6 life. That's all she wrote.
So with just 1 mana up, a blue mana, Johnson's not going to be able to do anything about this. I believe momentarily we should be setting up for game 3 here. And, yep, Johnson's going to pick him up.
Yeah, just a little bit of confusion. The Siege Gang obviously getting sacrificed with the Blink of an Eye on the stack. So Jody making sure that John doesn't accidentally draw a card off the Blink of an Eye because the spell is countered upon resolution. And now John Johnson has the thing, hey, do I go back to the drawing board? Do I go for Biogenic Ooze? If I'm going to get hit with a bunch of dresses and stuff, do I need a plan B? And maybe he does. Rakdos midrange there from Jody Keith. Didn't really seem like it was doing a whole lot, but a couple chip damages from here and there. Siege Gang Commander that wasn't easily answered, and all of a sudden it's tied up 1-1, and Jody Keith might be able to take this one down.
And this is the last match going in our top 8. We do have another update from the back table. We have John Hobbs, a 2-0 winner over Eric Hawkins.
2 weeks ago, Hobbs made the finals. Today he is locked into the top 4, and 3 of our 4 top players that I would say, the old school recognizable names, are out. Tannen Grace gone. Dylan Donegan eliminated. And now Eric Hawkins, unfortunately, having such a great tournament so far, falls in the quarterfinals.
And just 1 match to go here, but we came into the top 8 with 6 unique archetypes, and both of our repeats have now been bounced. We have 1 Azorius aggro, 1 mono blue aggro, and then we have the spread. John Hobbs is going to be playing Esper Control against Juan Leyva playing Azorius aggro. We have Robert Wagner Krenkel playing mono blue aggro. He's going to be playing against the winner of this match, either John Johnson on Simic Nexus or Jody Keith on Rakdos midrange.
Yeah, just a really diverse top 8. We had 6 different archetypes across 8 decks. Only 2 repeats with the 2 Azorius aggro and the 2 mono blue. But a top 4 that's fully diverse and in both color combinations as well as just makeup. You know, there's no like double ups on mid-range, the Simic Nexus deck. You know, it's cool, and it's going to be interesting to watch this top 4 play out. But first, we have to crown a winner here between John Johnson and Jody Keith.
And all of our top 8 players here, they did earn an invite to the Invitational at SCG Summer coming up. And if you're looking for your chance to earn an invitation, check out an Invitational Qualifier. These are tournaments that are offered more on the local level. Maybe your LGS is hosting one. $1,000 in cash, the top 8 there. And winners do receive invitations to the Invitational.
And I do believe that is both first and second place, and that's a newer addition to the invitational qualification system. We really want to reward consistency, and with both players making the finals and getting that invite, that's a pretty big deal.
Yeah, SCG points there as well. If you're interested in chasing the Players' Championship, there's a lot of points at the Invitational if you make it out there.
That's certainly true, and there's a lot of points in all of our events. That's basically just a way for players that want to play a bunch of invitational qualifiers. You can accumulate up to 15 points in a season from just invitational qualifiers and use those to qualify even if you don't make the finals or win one.
Yeah. So we're underway in Game 3. Johnson, tapped Breeding Pool. Keith, tapped Blood Crypt. We've seen this before. Turn 2, miss on Search for Escanta. Just Island for Johnson.
Yeah, could be a growth spiral, though.
Rick's Mighty Reveler on turn 2 for Jody Keith.
Yeah, this new Rakdos rare, reminiscent of Bedlam Reveler, but just on a much smaller scale. If you have no cards in hand, it's a 2-mana 2/2 that just says draw a card. If you are able to spectacle it, it turns into actual Bedlam Reveler ability. though not quite as large of a body.
Yeah, I don't think we've seen that so far. Mostly just looting. You saw Keith discarded a mountain. Turn 3 play for him is Legion War Boss, as John Johnson kind of has been up to nothing so far. And he's going to use Blink of an Eye for no value just to stop that Goblin token from coming, taking 2 off the Reveler to 18 this turn.
Yeah, I mean, the Legion War Boss is going to represent a significant amount of damage over time. And John Johnson's in a spot where he really just wants to buy himself some time. No turn 4 Reclamation, though. No turn to search for Skanta. Things aren't really going as planned, but he has the Chemister's Insight at the ready, and if he casts that, he can potentially dig for some of those more powerful effects in his deck.
Yeah, he hasn't really checked any of the significant spell-based boxes that the deck is trying to do. He's hit his land drops, which is important for this deck, but he hasn't really generated any momentum for his strategy.
Right, and here Jody Keith may try to find a way to capitalize. I think Legion War Boss is definitely step 1, but if he has a land to play, it could leave himself with a black mana source to be able to also cast a Drill Bit or a Duress.
Reveler coming across. Johnson's going to fall to 16. There was no attempt at the War Boss, so post-combat he'll cast Rekindling Phoenix. That'll land, and Johnson will Chemister's Insight.
That was pretty interesting. Jody Keith not attempting the War Boss, which has a higher damage output than Rekindling Phoenix, but uses his mana a little bit less efficiently, and the Rekindling Phoenix certainly hits hard on its own.
So we're going to go back Johnson's way. Pretty full grip here off those fresh Chemister's Insight cards. There's a Memorial to Genius, and here's a Hydroid Krasis for X equals 2.
Yeah,
Draw a card, gain a life.
This is basically the floor of the Hydroid Krasis, and it's not that bad. Draw a card, gain a life, and potentially block that Rixmati Reveler. And right now, Jody Keith doesn't have a significant clock, and this small Hydroid Krasis, though it may be, still checks about half of it.
Yeah, going back Keith's way. We know he has that Legion War Boss. Looks like a Siege Gang Commander hovering in the hand and a Direfleet Daredevil. Not really exciting Daredevil targets. There's something to be said about just exiling the Insight, but that's kind of whatever. Here's an attack with the Phoenix and the Reveler.
Yeah, I think at some point Jody might actually go Daredevil, use Blink of an Eye to bounce a potential blocker. But I think John Johnson here just going to lean into this Hydroid Krasis, block the Reveler, take 4 down to 13, and hopefully found over the last few draws something like Wilderness Reclamation to really get the engine pumped.
Krasis jumps in front of Reveler. They'll trade. Rekindling Phoenix comes across. Johnson to 13. And here's Siege Gang Commander. A lot of power on Keith's side now.
That's the first time Cedric Phillips has been on camera today. Of course, working behind the scenes, we had a bit of a snafu when it comes to personnel. One of our guys, Augustus, got sick. Cedric stepping in, really taking charge of that back end along with our good friend Robert in the booth. Make sure everything runs smoothly here for y'all on the SCG Tour.
Yeah, also had some help earlier in the tournament from Wilson Hunter, the innovator of Cardboard Live, the extension that you've all come to love.
Well, we've made them love it. And
you have no choice but to love it.
It is, but it's also great. So,
yes.
You know. Jody Keith representing a ton of damage here. An attack for quite a bit is going to force a Root Snare. But Jody can still just throw 6 damage at John Johnson if he so chooses.
Yeah, because of the Siege Gang Commander, if that connected, this game would have been over.
Right.
Goblins would have cleaned up. Root Snare is timely here. Keith is going to cast a post-combat Direfleet Daredevil, and now he has 4 mana. He could actually just cast the Chemister's Insight if he's interested in that. And he's targeting it.
This is a bit strange, the timing on this Daredevil. Keith actually has more stuff he can do right now than play Daredevil, and John Johnson has very little incentive not to cast the Chemister's Insight here anyway. So getting basically the bottom barrel usage out of the Direfleet Daredevil here, and I'm curious if what his intentions were.
Yeah, so that's a check on Johnson, but Johnson is going to jumpstart in response. And it's not a discard spell follow-up. It's just Rekindling Phoenix. Keith will dispatch that and pass.
Yeah, I'm not stoked about this attack from Jody Keith in general, just this way of applying pressure. At this juncture, he has enough on the battlefield to clean it up. John Johnson's going to need Nexus of Fate after Nexus of Fate or Root Snare to make sure he doesn't die in combat. And he's starting off here with a Nexus of Fate, and let's see if he can take down the game right here.
Yeah, Wilderness Reclamation. Here's Nexus of Fate. How many turns can Johnson take? This is the deciding game 3.
Yeah, and the other 3 of our quarterfinal matches are done. This is the match that will decide the rest of the top 4.
Winner here gets to play against Robert Wagner on Mono Blue Aggro. Getting that reclamation online is huge for Johnson, though no search for Escanta might be tough to find the cards he needs.
If I'm not mistaken, Jody Keith is the only player in this top 8 playing Goblin Chain Whirler. I have to imagine that he is quite happy playing against decks like the Mono Blue Aggro deck, since Chain Whirler is so potent against the weaker draws from the Mono Blue deck, as well as having a bunch of things like Lava Coil and Shock to take care of the Curious Obsession to creatures, as well as Tempest Djinn.
Yeah, that much is true, though. It's quite a bit less effective here as you see John Johnson, another Nexus of Fate. Not really too productive of a turn, just kind of treading water here. He needs to start actually generating some value on extra turns.
Yep, I mean, as far as I can tell here, he actually still has the untap from the Wilderness Reclamation, so he can still pop that Memorial to Genius and draw 2 cards and kind of dig for more stuff. But again, Nexus of Fate without any sort of search for Escanta engine going, or without doing anything with the extra mana that you're gaining from the Wilderness Reclamation, means you're not really doing much of anything. As I've said time and time again, Wilderness Reclamation is just a big mana battery, and you got to find a way to use it. Search for Escanta being that key piece that John Johnson is missing right now.
Though he does get to spin his tires a little bit. He's playing 4 copies of Memorial to Genius in his deck, and that card plays super well with Wilderness Reclamation. You get to untap it the turn you play it, use your land, your mana base can just help you find some more cards, try to set up to get multiple reclamations, have those big Nexus of Fate sequences.
Yeah, it looks like maybe one of the Nexus of Fates accidentally got shuffled in the wrong way. Just fixing that while we are shuffling with this Nexus of Fate. Handed his deck to the judge to make sure that that got handled properly. John Johnson here untapping, still has access to a lot of mana, as well as this Memorial to Genius. Chemist's Insights to play.
Still 5 mana left over here. And an extra turn on backup as he started with Nexus of Fate here. Here's a tap of 4. Going to jumpstart that Insight.
And you're really seeing just what the deck can do once it has Wilderness Reclamation on the battlefield. Being able to cast and jumpstart, Chemist's Insight pushes you closer and closer to closing out the game and drawing those extra Nexus of Fate and really getting the engine churning.
Another bonus turn for Johnson. He'll start it by casting Search for Escanta. If he has another Nexus, then things start to look really good when you have that online.
Yeah, and he floats 6, casts 1 for 7, gets Nexus of Fate, and he's going to be able to transform that Escanta pretty quickly here, as long as he's able to put 1 more card in the graveyard, and I believe he has enough to pop that Memorial to Genius, and then he can just put any card from the top of the deck into the graveyard, as long as it's not Nexus of Fate. But even if it is Nexus of Fate, he'll just take another turn, and that's fine.
That ain't bad. And more action. Here's a Growth Spiral. More cards in the graveyard. Puts an island on the battlefield.
Yeah, and if he wants, he can also just cast Root Snare just to put a 7th card in the graveyard, and that'll give him the option to keep the top card if he so chooses. And since he's going off right now with Escanta, the Sunken Ruin, and that Wilderness Reclamation, he just wants to make sure that he's able to transform it and has all the cards he needs to get the job done.
Yep, and he is going to keep with his search, transform it into Escanta the Sunken Rune. Starts with an island. It's going to activate Escanta the Sunken Rune.
Yeah, and this is a big deal. You want to do this on main phase because if you find another Wilderness Reclamation like he just did, that gives you another untap and another potential usage.
And that is what he finds. That's the cast. Just a million mana to work with from here.
Yeah, not only a million mana, but also has access to that Escanta activation over and over again. Every Wilderness Reclamation represents another activation, as well as a bunch of mana. And now he's just digging for more Nexus of Fate in order to seal this game effectively. He still needs technically to draw a win condition, but when you get so many Wilderness Reclamations on the battlefield, so many Escanta activations, the odds of missing become as close to 0 as you can get.
And eventually you do actually just get there.
Right. So he's going to float, looks like 10 mana. He's going to use quite a bit, or a little bit here to activate the Escanta the Sunken Ruin, digging for that Nexus of Fate.
And just a straight miss there. He picked up a Growth Spiral earlier in the turn.
Yep. So he can still cast some card draw spells, Growth Spirals, etc. But he can no longer activate Escanta the Sunken Ruin. So might just have nothing to do with the rest of that mana. We'll see.
Cast Growth Spiral, puts a forest onto the battlefield. And here's an activation of Memorial to Genius. Draw 2 off of that.
Yeah, this is really showing off the power of Memorial to Genius in the deck, too. It kind of felt like he was maybe running out of stuff, and he still had that Desperation Memorial to Genius, and he might have hit it, he might have missed. But at the very least, he still has a Root Snare, so I think he's still not dead.
It still has 13 life. Finally, Jody Keith will take a turn.
Yeah, it took a minute. It took like 7 minutes.
Took a few of them.
Time thief.
In the on-time rounds, a little more excusable.
Yeah, and it looks like he does have access to a Hydroid Krasis in hand. Now, Jody Keith does have the ability to deal a lot of direct damage here thanks to that Siege Gang Commander. With 6 mana, that represents 6 damage. But a Root Snare means that none of these creatures are dealing actual combat damage. And he just doesn't have enough goblins on the battlefield, even over the course of 2 turns to win the game. But that Legion War Boss that he has looming in his hand could help provide that extra goblin body or 2 that he needs to close the game. Now it's all up to John Johnson, though. Can he miss twice? Can he miss 3 times? I don't think so.
Such a big ask.
Yeah, and this Rakdos mid-range deck just doesn't have the answers to resolved Wilderness Reclamations.
And it's a situation with Johnson on 13. He doesn't just need to miss on Nexus of Fate. He needs to miss on Root Snare and Nexus of Fate.
Right.
Here's that Legion War Boss for Keith. Just 1 card left in hand. This is just a bunch of attackers that this is just that same check. Root Snare or not. There's Root Snare.
Yep, and with a Hydroid Crescent in hand, as well as multiple activations of that Esconda the Sunken Rune coming next turn, I cannot imagine that Jody Keith is ever going to get another turn.
Back John Johnson way. There's a Simic Guildgate.
Yeah, I think a good play here from John Johnson is going to be to cast his Crassus before going to those Wilderness Reclamations. You get that big body on the battlefield, a bit of life, and you still get quite a few activations of Esconda the Sunken Rune. What he can do is actually cast Hydroid Crassus for X equals... he's just doing it now, excuse me. But he could just leave open the 3 mana and the Esconda the Sunken Rune and still activate it and just cast a slightly smaller Hydroid Crassus.
And here's Krasis. X equals...
Krasis, excuse me.
X equals 8. Jody Keith deciding if he wants it to be 5 and 3 or 4 and 4. Lands on 4 and 4.
Yeah, and he's going to get to untap all these lands with 4 fresh cards and a bit more life to work with.
Keith setting
there
those D6s on the Krasis. About the most important decision he's making in this game right now.
Yep.
As John Johnson will cast another Nexus of Fate.
Yeah, and we're going to shuffle that one back in, and we still have 1 more Wilderness Reclamation trigger to go, as well as 2 more Esconda the Sunken Rune activations to go. This one looks like it's all wrapped up with that big Hydroid Crassus and a free turn or 2 coming.
And this is a real I got nowhere to be situation for Jody Keith. May as well make Johnson go through the motions, but he's got it. Bunch of mana floating. Here is that Desconta activation. Still has that extra turn queued up.
John Johnson here digging with Esconta, finds a Chemist Surge he can cast and jumpstart that. Still has a ton of mana to work with. Has that big Hydro Krasis, as well as a turn floating.
Yeah, so he's going to cast that Insight, draw 2. Bunch of lands still untapped here. Is that 9 of them?
Yeah, I don't know. It's a lot. Decides not even to jumpstart that Chemister's Insight. He has it rolled up, folks. An attack for 8 coming across. This is elementary.
That large Krasis at least has a very quick closing speed, as there is a Nexus of Fate once again.
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the things about Nexus of Fate. You don't need the Wilderness Reclamations and the Escanta the Sunken Ruins. Sometimes you just need a big boy. Here, John Johnson has that big boy, that 8/8 Hydroid Krasis. And all he needs to do is find 1 more Nexus of Fate, and he has 3 activations of Escanta the Sunken Ruin to do it.
Hydro Krasis has just been a slam dunk out of this set. We see it in this archetype in Simic Nexus and other Nexus variants. We've seen it in Sultai Midrange, another very winning deck that won the Indianapolis Open. We saw Jonathan Job actually splashing green in the Drake's deck for Hydroid Krasis.
Right, and as I said earlier, it transcends genres. Card is just insanely powerful, and here, it's doing a lot of work. And if John Johnson can find 1 more copy of Nexus of Fate, he's going to take this game and put himself into the top 4.
And here's a big tap. Instead of just floating mana, we're going to the Wilderness Reclamation phase of the turn. Activate that Escanta. 1, 2, 3, 4. Deck's getting pretty small now. There's Nexus of Fate.
Yep. And that's the thing. The games go so long and you see so many cards and draw so many cards that eventually it becomes virtually impossible to miss because all 4 of your Nexus of Fate are still in your deck.
Johnson with 5 mana floating is just going to tap 7 for the Nexus. Whatever, he's got it.
Yep. And that's going to be it. He's going to take those 2 extra turns. Jody Keith's going to go out in style, throw 2 points of damage at John Johnson, and then he's going to take 2 extra turns in a row and attack for 16, close out this match.
Like that sack. You got to let him know you're still there.
Yeah.
We're still playing a game, man.
Yeah.
You got to get through me.
I have not F6'd.
I have effects. I have effects on your upkeep. Clearing that mana out. I think we're going to that extra turn at this point. Some growth spirals happening.
Yeah, not even bothering to do the Escantos, just attacking, getting the job done that way. Jody Keith's going to throw 2 more damage to John Johnson, but it's not enough. And his Simic Nexus deck is going to put him into the top 4.
Yeah, so this is our Wilderness Reclamation deck that made the top 8 this weekend, and John Johnson